But anyway, yeah, we've got some really cool pictures here. Look how amazing this is. I
Thank you.
had no idea you were even on Instagram, but this is incredible. These pictures, and I think we talked a little bit about some of the stuff you're doing. But man, I mean, look at the sharpness and the detail of the birds, and this is amazing. This would be, I could see this in a magazine or something for
Oh,
Pennsylvania.
thanks.
I mean, that's really awesome. Oh, that's definitely as well. Are there any pictures that you want to point out that you think would be interesting to kind of talk about first before we really dive into the birding and the photography with nature?
Um, well, like specific pictures wise, I mean, I have a lot on there. I definitely have some favorites myself, but some of my most favorite ones that I've done are the ones that I can like kind of tell a story with. And you mentioned at the beginning, I am an educator. And so I kind of use this as an alternative platform to educate as well. So for example, the top right there, that's a bird called a least tern. And I I have really long Instagram captions. I usually max out the word counts, but I get into researching them, and there's always sort of a theme to what I post, or not always, but most of the time. And so like I like to highlight conservation concerns. I like to highlight unique aspects of certain species that maybe not as many people are familiar with. One of my favorite subjects are shorebirds and like ocean birds. And they're also pretty vulnerable in a lot of cases, especially the ones that breed on our like eastern seaboard beaches. So this individual is actually sitting on a nest of eggs. If you scroll through the other pictures, you can see the eggs. But this was on like a fairly busy, yeah, there it is, fairly busy beach. Um, and thankfully, the area that these were in were kind of roped off, but there are other areas where they aren't as well protected. And so just like highlighting things about like when people go to the beach, like making sure that you're aware that there are these small little birds sharing that space with you, right? And to be respectful of that. And so that's sort of what my Instagram has turned into. It's not just a place for me to put my pictures to show them off, but it's more of like trying to tell a story with it, trying to have like a grander purpose behind what I do, and just share, what I am passionate about and what I'm interested in with other people. So,
Yeah, I think that this is a really good story. There's a good shot of the eggs. This is
yeah,
like really amazing. So,
thanks.
I guess take me through what you're bringing out with you. Is it different for herps compared to like birds, like shorebirds? And then what about like more woodland or field habitat versus, open ocean or like even along the shoreline? Do you have like different gear that you bring?
Well, I would love to have different gear, but photography is quite an expensive hobby. So I mostly shoot with two different lenses. I'm in the process of looking to get a third like macro lens, which would be more for like the herps. I've gotten a lot more into those recently, trying to photograph them. So I have my body is a Nikon D850, which is a DSLR. A lot of the industry is starting to move toward the mirrorless setups, which I've heard great things about. But also, again, that price point is pretty up there. So I'm happy with what I get from what I have. My lens is I primarily use a 150 to 600 telephoto that's made by Tamron. Once again, it's like I'd love to have a Nikon brand lens to fit my camera, but for what the price difference is, it's a really good um, bang for your buck when it comes to like somebody who is not necessarily selling to magazines or doing this for as a career, but wants to get that next level of image over like something like a standard point and shoot camera or a smaller lens. So that setups, I've had that for about probably going on 4 years at this point, and very happy with it. I've not managed to break it yet, which is surprising considering some of the things I get into with it. But yeah, like a lot of these shots are. just handheld. So like these ones, I like laying down on the beach to get eye level with them. When you're in the woods, it depends. Sometimes I'll use a monopod if I know that I'm going to be out for a while or wanting to get like shots in lower lighting conditions. Yeah, this one was on a tripod because it was in really dark forest, and so I had to turn the shutter speed way down. So it just depends on where you go. Usually, I like to try to pack lighter, unless I know that I'm gonna be really hitting the photography hard. Like in this case, I knew that there were owls in the area, and so I brought out the full tripod setup and everything, and just kind of sat and waited. But other times it's very dynamic. You'll just take a hike and you'll just bump into something you were never expecting, and you have 20 seconds to get your settings, make sure they're checked right, and then snap a few pics and hope that they're clear and in focus and how you want them. So it's usually the best pictures come when you least expect them, in my opinion. So
The D850, that's probably one of the last great DSLR cameras. I mean, I know that it was like 3,500 when it first came out, and
yeah.
I have a friend who has one as well. But I think he's kind of feeling it like you. You spend all the money just to get the dang camera, and then it's
Yeah.
like, what do I do for a lens now? Because you spend it all on the camera, which, I mean, yeah, it's, but that's probably, I don't want to say it's the last, but it's one of the last greatest DSLR cameras that are out there that are still available, and it still holds its
Yeah.
weight. Being, I mean, you're shooting in 8K for the most part, from what I see from the photography side.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's what setting you have on, or if you can
Yeah,
change that.
it's 40 megapixel. So it's yeah, it's big files, like really big files. And I shoot in RAW, and then edit everything in Adobe Lightroom,
And
which
you're
is
shooting full frame too, right?
yes, yeah. So yeah, you get a lot of detail, which for birds, I mean, a lot of people see the big lens and they think, oh, you can just. I mean, I get so many comments when I'm out hiking with it. They're like, oh, you can, see a mile away with that thing, and it's like, yeah, you can, but it doesn't. It's not as much as one would think. So this owl, I was very close to this owl. It was really cooperative. This was in Congaree National Park down in South Carolina, and it's used to people. It's on a boardwalk area, and so it just didn't really mind. But a lot of times you just can't get very close to your subjects, and so you're cropping in a lot, and it really helps to have that extra resolution on that. And for birds, it's very noticeable with like feather detail. I find it's really like easy to see when it's out of focus because you'll lose those lines in the feathers, and that's just killer when you get back and it's you think you got a good shot, good composition, and then it's just like out of focus a little bit. So the key to it really is just taking a lot of pictures and um, you know, hoping you get lucky. So
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Well, that's crazy. Just the walkthrough that you explained. Now, I like to use pretty much a tripod, but I mean the animals are very slow compared to birds. So I could set up a tripod, have a fluid head, and probably get as much of a scene as I want. But yeah, this is really interesting hearing the walkthrough of what it's like going out birding, and of course the subjects have to be willing to let you get them, and birds are a lot easier at avoiding you than anything else.
yeah, I always tell people I picked probably the hardest subject to start out with in nature photography. I mean, I've done just about everything except for really like underwater photography. And just about everything is easier than birds because you really do get that split second in most cases, especially with things like songbirds. This woodpecker, this is actually an endangered species of the red cockaded woodpecker. Yeah, down in Carolina Sandhills in South Carolina. And they were shimmying up and down trees, and it was just about, we call it spray and pray. You just take a bunch of pictures and hope that one of them is how you want it to be. For every one picture I save, I would say that there's at least, 15 to 20 that I delete, just because they're not quite the composition you're looking for. But the other really interesting thing about birds, that's maybe a little bit different than a lot of other subjects, is they're so variable in their behaviors, and it happens so quickly that sometimes you'll catch things that you aren't even expecting to get, and it ends up being something brand new and even more interesting than you could have hoped for. I have on there somewhere, back in like April, there's a really great example of that. If you scroll back down, it's somewhere there. Yeah, keep going. Oh, there you go. So on the left, the little blue guy. This is a blue-gray gnat catcher. Just like one small snippet of frame did he have that expression on, and I didn't even really catch it like while I was watching him, but it ended up being such a funny shot in the end, with him like yelling at the camera. So
He had enough.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like, what are you?
yeah, giving me the side eye. And they have that nice unibrow there too that makes them really animated.
That's awesome. So let's take a look here. There was one, oh, there we go. We might have to catch that later. This this one caught my eye. I think this is one of the coolest. So what species of skink was this? Are you familiar, or is it
Yeah,
unsure?
that is, I believe it's a southern five-line skink.
Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah, I think southeastern five-line skink. So, what Plestiodon inexpectatus. Yeah, this was another one of those like very unexpected shots. I did not think it was going to turn out nearly as cool as it ended up. This was from a kayak on a river in South Carolina, on a dead fallen log that they had cut a portion of it, and then it had sort of rotted back. And they were, as I paddled down along, I was mostly looking for northern cottonmouths, and didn't end up finding any, but these guys were skittering all over the place. And I saw a larger one crawl into that crack, and I just kind of parked my kayak and sat there until he peeked his head out like that. He never did come out any further than that, but I just love like the cautious expression that he has, peeking out to see if I was still there. So,
They're definitely one of my favorites. I mean, you could probably see what it's eating the majority of.
yeah.
Definitely eating those millipedes if it gets the chance.
Hmm.
I used to have a male southeastern five-line skink. He was really incredible with activity.
Nice.
He might have actually been bigger than this guy.
Mhm.
I actually trained him to come on his, like when I'd call him by his name and I could hand feed him. It was pretty
Oh,
epic.
wow.
Yeah, it was really epic. What people don't know about skinks is that they, ironically, will eat seeds and berries just as much as insects. So there's actually a scene on the YouTube channel, I'd have to find it, of his name was Pharaoh. I don't even know like why, but it just was. He had the red head and everything, but
Mhm.
he would just destroy blueberries. He would like claw them. You'd find him like he would have the juice all over his face, and he'd like wipe it on the ground and stuff. And you could just tell he would lick it up and stuff. He loved it.
Nice.
So yeah, it just made me wonder. I definitely want to set a bounty for you if you're going to get any more photos of reptiles.
Yeah.
If you can make it a point at some point, I don't know if this is even on the bucket list. If you can go to southeastern PA and get a cool shot of a fence lizard, or not a fence lizard, sorry, an Italian wall lizard,
Oh, okay.
the invasive lizard that is now becoming pretty much a permanent resident in like Bucks County, Montgomery County. I don't know if you even heard about it.
I've heard of them. I didn't know they were becoming so prevalent though. I thought it was more like Philly area, kind of like in the city type of thing. Um,
Oh, I'll
but
watch it.
yeah, that's interesting.
There we go. We might as well just pull it up so people can see.
Yeah.
I'm not signed in. That's probably a good thing. Then there's no records that people will see like exactly. But yeah, so we can just go down here. So it's definitely been growing. There's other invasive species, ironically, by the way, like geckos and stuff.
Hmm.
I think that it's moved into another county. I'm not sure which one of these, but it's been unconfirmed. But it's definitely moved into a third county. I don't know which one it is, but yeah. So it has migrated a little bit to Montgomery County. From what I understand, it was always in, not always, but it was first discovered in Bucks County.
Hmm.
But I mean, with your camera and the way you're able to just like kind of nail them, I mean, these are just a really beautiful looking lizard. Whether or not
Yeah.
they're invasive, I mean, we could sit here and say the same thing about the lanternfly. Just the color on these animals,
Hmm.
um, just really incredible to see. It's crazy
Yeah.
that lives in Pennsylvania. Nobody would expect that.
I know. Yeah. Do you know? Was it like a pet trade introduction, or do they have a handle on like how they first got here?
I think that's how it started. Was somebody
Okay.
wanted to control the mosquito population in their backyard, and
Oh.
and somehow they survived. And yeah, of course they live
Oh.
by houses, but just
Yeah.
crazy to see how these guys are doing. I mean, just the color detail on these lizards
Yeah,
is
that's
crazy.
fantastic. Well, yeah, I know I've been down to Florida and I mean, they're a mess with invasives down there, but like I've seen like the Cuban tree frogs and the house geckos are always fun to see down there. Like we were in Florida in like a condo a few years back and there was a pretty decent sized house gecko like in the hallway like leading to our room and just like hanging out on the wall, eating bugs around the light and just yeah, like you said, like really cool to see those things that even though they're not supposed to be around, just interesting animals.
I think there's some type of gecko that is also invading Pennsylvania, which I don't
Oh,
know.
really?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that though, or it's supposedly established, but it's like again the southeast pocket where
Yeah.
the wall lizard is. So we have three here. I think it's the common house gecko that's still alive.
Hmm.
Let's see. Supposedly, I don't think any of these were found on iNaturalist. That's 2008, so it's probably not that one then. Watch it be the tropical house gecko of all the weird lizard. Oh no, look at that. Yeah,
Oh,
maybe it's this
Mediterranean.
one.
Oh, and Fayette too.
Oh, it might be close by.
Yeah.
That's crazy that it's been found in that many counties.
Yeah.
None this year though, but a lot last year.
Hmm.
What does this look like? You can tell us if this is like similar to the lizard on your hotel, I guess, in Florida.
Yeah, I think it might have been the same. I don't know if it was the tropical or what type, but like pale, like some faint barring on the back. They were it kind of depended on the size, what exactly they looked like, but definitely like the gecko face and the cool toes. Yeah. Yeah, that barring, like
Yeah, it's really interesting just to see that. But I don't know. I thought it'd be interesting to pull up, but yeah, definitely the wall lizard would be crazy. I guess this would be another one if you found these
Mhm.
guys. It's even crazier to think that they might even be in your own backyard.
Yeah, that one in Fayette, I'd be interested to know who did that, like where that ended up.
Let's see what year that was. If it's 23, that would be really insane.
Yeah.
Might not pull up. Oh, there we go. 2017.
Mm. Oh,
Found a
found yeah, truckload of steel. Huh.
Yeah, but they're they're not native to Louisiana either.
Yeah. It is amazing when you start getting into the conservation world, how much that is so well established is invasive. It's like, especially when you get into plants, it's like really eye-opening to just see like these things that are ubiquitous, not even just in backyards, but like in forests and everything. They're like, yeah, that's not a native species. Or, I mean, I think like the lanternflies people notice because they're bright and they're flashy and they're in a lot of cities. But yeah, just like the amount of people that I mean, it's got to be like some nice blissful ignorance to see all that the nice blooms of Japanese knotweed in the fall with all the pretty white flowers and the bees loving it. And just think, oh yeah, it's a nice plant, but it's, to know how bad it is, like it's very eye-opening when you start to learn more about it. And yeah, like you said, I had no idea the Italian fence lizards were even here. So like there's so much of it that even people who are relatively, I consider myself to be relatively well up to date on it. Like they just go under the radar, and that's how they can spread and get out of control so quickly. So
Yeah, I mean, I know even stuff that existed in plant nurseries. Now we're finally realizing, hey, we shouldn't have been planting privet and Japanese barberry
yeah,
because it's
burning bush, yeah.
yeah, it's horrible. Especially in Indiana County, I think the barberry is probably one of their dominant invasives.
Mm.
I know in more of the Laurel Highlands area, like in the mountainous regions, it's probably not weed. I don't know if you'd agree, but closer in my neck of the woods, it is.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of knotweed. There's a lot of knotweed in like Allegheny County and like northern Westmoreland, like along the river corridors. Um, Laurel Highlands, there's a good bit of it. I would say also, I mean, like multiflora rose obviously is really everywhere. There's what I notice in the woods a lot is you'll get like autumn olive thickets or the privet that like outcompete stuff like spice bush. I've noticed that even in some areas that I consider to be like fairly good habitat, you'll find patches of those, and it's always a little disappointing. Um, but yeah, like I mean, the knotweed is kind of next level when it comes to like riparian zones. It just chokes them out like crazy. Um, which I used to work for a watershed group, and so that was more of like the areas that I was frequenting were those riparian corridors, and I witnessed in just the 3 years that I worked there, like areas that had almost none of it be completely taken over by it by the time I left. So yeah, it's a big problem.
What is your opinion, or are you familiar with? Is it the Asian longhorn beetle? I
The
think
ones up
that's
in
what
New
it's.
York, or
Yeah, yep, the ones in.
yeah, I don't know much about them, honestly. I know that they are potentially damaging to a lot of like our native hardwoods, which for me, as like an environmentalist, my concern is always first with like what is it doing to our native ecosystem. Sometimes, like sometimes I'm a little too ignorant of like our human systems. Like when it comes to the lanternflies, I've always been like, oh, they're not really as bad as we thought, right? They're not impacting a lot of our native ecosystems, from what I've seen. And they do seem to like sort of be being started. They're starting to become integrated into some of the food webs, like in the eastern part of the state where they started out. But then again, like they are still causing really bad crop damage. And so like I tend to overlook that, which is something that I need to be a little bit more cognizant of in those conversations. But yeah, when it comes to like things like the emerald ash borer or this Asian longhorn beetle, though, it's like that's what really scares me. Because it can have such tremendous effects on the natural ecosystem, which unfortunately also tends to mean less dollars go to fighting it, right? A lot of money can go to protect agriculture because it brings money back, but not a lot will go to protecting, old growth forests and things because they're not quite the same resource. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated conversation, and there's a lot of good people working on that, like making sure that it stays in the lesser known invasives stay in the conversation and not just get overshadowed by some of the ones that are having more of an economic impact. So,
Yeah, I think the lanternfly is one of those that I think there was a little bit extra hype, at least for Western Pennsylvania and parts of Central. I won't deny the people that lived in Philadelphia and Eastern PA that saw it at its peak, but there's so many more areas that are urbanized that the lanternflies could just invade and Yeah, they could have just dominated and taken over because there's not as much invert life out there because of pesticides and insecticides and stuff. And
Yeah.
um, by the time they got to our side, I'm not saying that they weren't bad in Westmoreland. And yeah, they are impacting grapes and different things like that. But like I've already seen, I was trying to bait a toad in the backyard to eating one. And there's two stories. The first one is it was a larger toad. He immediately saw it and he took it before the lanternfly could respond. And
Mhm.
then I got a cool short where I had a lanternfly next to a juvenile American toad, and it turned around and looked at the lanternfly, and the lanternfly started like swaying in the like it was acting like it was a leaf in the wind,
Yeah.
and it was like watching the toad, and it was kind of like turning its like it was trying to like get an edge to like fly away, and the
Yeah.
toad just didn't know what it was doing, and it actually did get away from the younger toad, but I have yet to get that on camera.
I would love to get a picture of one myself because again, like, that's a good story to put up on the Instagram and talk about exactly what we're talking about now, like how they're beginning to become integrated. And you see it with a lot of other invasives that are very well established, like earthworms, for example. Like we really don't have, and this is something that a ton of people don't know, but we really don't have many native earthworms in um, the northern tier of the United States, and that's because of the last glaciation. So where I'm located in like Westmoreland and Fayette, we're south of that line, but there was maybe one or two species of native worm, and now we have a lot of like the European worms that have come over and just been here for over probably a couple hundred years. And there's a lot of myths too about worms that are like perpetuated, like how they are good for the soil and things like that. And they are if you're growing a garden full of crops, but not necessarily for a lot of our native species that are used to that denser clay pack and things like that. But plenty of birds eat worms, plenty of other animals eat worms. Like they have become so integrated that it's almost they're naturalized at this point. They're no longer invasive. Unfortunately, a lot of times you just lose things along the way. Another one would be like our mantises. We have the Chinese and the European mantis that are the only ones that I really ever see, and they've largely outcompeted our native Carolina mantis. But like a lot of people just kind of see them as the default mantis species that we have. And so it's really a matter of time and perspective on like what the effect of those invasive species are. And once it goes on for long enough, it's sort of just that's the way it is. And things adapt. So it's a really interesting topic, and it's one that I don't ever want to diminish the work that's being done on invasive species because it is really important to like nip it when you can. But then there are other cases where it's sort of like, it's too little, too late. We just have to sort of manage it and live with it as we go. Unfortunately, so.